All right guys, so we're here in central Oklahoma just a few days before the Oklahoma Selfbow Jamboree gets kicked off, and we're out here having an Osage cutting party. And so I'm going to take a few minutes just to talk about how to identify Osage, what to look for in a quality tree. We're going to talk about how to drop these trees safely, because there are some things to take into consideration, and basically just everything about harvesting Osage, splitting, and making bow staves. So I've got a pretty good sized Osage tree here behind me. Now, one of the characteristics that I look for when I'm looking at Osage is all these kind of arcing branches. If you look on this thing, you can see there's a bunch of branches that are just kind of laying over and arcing over like that. That's a dead giveaway that this is an Osage tree, and when you learn to look for that, you can identify these things going down the interstate at 70 miles an hour just by the growth form of the tree. Obviously they will have thorns. Most of the thorns that you're going to find are on the younger branches, the newer growth, or the young trees. So here we have a honey locust, and you can see the big old nasty thorns on this thing. Osage thorns are not nearly that big. And then also, if you're looking at them in the fall, you'll find the Osage Orange fruits. Now this is springtime. All the fruits are rotten. I don't see anything laying on the ground, so that's not going to be a real big help in identifying these trees. Another characteristic of Osage is it tends to grow like this in these little tight clumps, because the fruits are full of seeds and they don't disperse very well. And so when you get a fruit that rots down, you've got, a couple hundred seeds coming out right all there together, and they'll grow up in these big tight clumps like this. And that can sometimes make it difficult to harvest Osage, because you do have so many kind of these intertangled tree trunks, and it can be hard to, cut one because the tops are all intertangled. So you got to really think about how you're going to drop these things. And sometimes you got to get up there and cut branches off so that you can get those individual trunks to fall. So Tim's just got this tree cut all the way through in the bottom. And this is something you run into oftentimes with Osage. It grows in these kind of dense thickets. It can be really hard to get these things to drop because the tops get tangled up. So we'll see how this goes. So basically what I'm looking for when I'm looking at these trees and trying to figure out which ones I'm going to cut and which ones I'm not is I'm looking at the bark to see if there's any spiral in it. If there is, I'm just probably not even going to mess with that tree. So I'm looking for straight grain in that tree. I'm looking for that bark to run up and down the tree. And so if you look at this tree right here, you can see that the bark spirals around that tree. And the grain is, when you go to split that thing, the grain is going to do the same thing. And so this is a tree that I'm not even going to worry about. If I was in a situation where I had very limited access to Osage, I might cut this and then worry about having to take that propeller twist out later. But in this situation where we've got hundreds of Osage trees, you can really cherry pick and get the very best ones. This one's, I'm not even going to worry about it. So for this tree here, you can see how this bark kind of comes up this way and just spirals. If we were to cut this tree and then split it, this thing is gonna the grain and is gonna go around like that, and that's not really ideal for a bow stave. So this is a tree that's gonna stay standing. So Carson's behind me dropping some trees right now. Now, when you're cutting this Osage, oftentimes it grows in these clumps, and you've got to be real conscious of how the tops are intermingling, because if you make the wrong cut on these trees, they get hung up and they can be very hard to drop safely. They can get the tops twisted up and twist on the stump and kick back on you if you're not real careful. That thing's gonna come down all around you in there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe right here. But It's gonna come down fast. I don't think that'll be able to kick up really. Woo!
I'm looking for a nice section without a bunch of knots in it. And if you look at the bark closely, you can often tell that, you know, there may not be any real big obvious knots or branches coming out. But if you look at the knots, you can see, or look at the bark, you can see where little pin knots will be underneath that bark. Also, I'm looking for a nice, long, fairly straight section. You know, it can have a little bit of a curve to it, and you can get, you know, from the top edge of that, you can get a reflexed stave, and from the bottom edge, you're going to get all deflex staves, and from the sides, you're going to have staves with C curves in it, which all of those things will make bows. You're just going to have to address them in different ways. And so if you can get a nice stovepipe straight piece of Osage, you can quarter that thing and then split those quarters into eighths and just get a bunch of nice staves all the way around that tree. But this tree right here on the left-hand side's got a nice section with no branches. It's probably 5 feet, you know, so you're not gonna get any real long bows, but you could get probably 8 good, you know, 50-something inch staves out of that tree. So that would be a good section to cut. And then on up the tree, you've got other smaller sections that you could split in half and get some bows out of that as well. That's a nice branch there.
Yeah.
So this thing right there is something you really want to watch out for. Last time I cut Osage was in the middle of winter. This is poison ivy. And even without leaves on it, that stuff will get on you. And if you're as reactive to poison ivy as me, you're going to be hurting for a while. So watch out for that. Got to seal the ends up so they don't develop dry end checks or cracks in the ends. What are you doing?
Sealing up.
For what do you do that for?
So they don't crack.
So they don't what?
Crack.
Oh, that's a good idea. All right, so we've got a load of Osage cut. We've got the ends sealed, and tomorrow we're gonna start splitting these things. And the OJAM is gonna get kicked off. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can stay up to date on what we're uploading, and we'll see you next time.